They say the worst battles don't start with shouting, but with silence. It was just after sunrise when Daniel Reyes stepped out onto his porch and saw the envelope taped to his front door. Bright orange, the kind you couldn't miss if you tried. Bold black letters read, "Notice of violation, immediate fee adjustment." He didn't open it right away. Instead, he stared at it for a moment, listening to the morning birds, watching the sun climb over the red Arizona rooftops. A deep breath. Then he pulled it down and peeled it open. Excessive vehicle presence, the letter read. A fine of $750 added to his monthly HOA fees, effective immediately. The offense? 3 cars in the driveway. Daniel laughed under his breath, dry, tired. 3 cars, he muttered. His beat-up Ford work truck, his wife's white Subaru, which she drove to her ER shifts, and his son's old Toyota Camry, a gift for his acceptance into Arizona State University. 3 cars, all theirs, all parked in their own damn driveway. Inside the house, his wife Monica was making coffee. She looked up when he walked in, saw the look on his face, and didn't need to ask. "They did it again," Daniel said, dropping the notice on the kitchen table. "Another violation?" she asked, eyebrows raised. He nodded. "Too many cars." She rubbed her temple. "God, they've lost it."
"What do they expect? We
Uber our groceries home?" Daniel sat down, staring blankly at the steam curling up from his mug. "I think she's doing this on purpose." She was Marla Green, the HOA president of Hidden Pines, a neighborhood that looked picture-perfect on paper. Neatly trimmed lawns, cream-colored homes, quiet streets. A place where your mailboxes had to match your neighbors, your holiday decorations had to be approved, and God help you if your trash bins were visible for more than 17 minutes after pickup. Marla wasn't elected. She inherited the HOA presidency when her husband passed away. No one else had the time or the patience to deal with the paperwork. So she stayed, and year after year, rule by rule, she transformed Hidden Pines into a dictatorship of pink clipboards, passive-aggressive newsletters, and unrelenting fines. Daniel had tried reasoning with her once, 6 months ago, at a community meeting when she fined him for not maintaining visual harmony with his neighbors because of the color of his garage door. "It's tan," he'd said, "the same shade as every other door here." Marla hadn't even looked up from her phone. "It's 3 shades darker under sunlight. You'll need to repaint." Daniel did repaint it, but not because he agreed, because Monica asked him to. "Let's not start a war," she'd said at the time. "It's just a door." But now, this was different. The violation wasn't just petty, it was personal. Daniel knew Marla had walked by that morning. He'd seen her outside, her blonde bun bobbing as she leaned in close to his driveway, phone camera clicking. He looked back at the notice again. "This isn't about vehicles. This is about control." He stood up, walked into his home office, and opened the locked drawer in his desk. Inside were 2 things. An old, faded photo of his mother in front of her house, before she lost it in a foreclosure triggered by HOA harassment, and a folder labeled Civic Core Holdings. For 5 years, Daniel had played the long game. He had learned the rules, learned how the HOA worked. And while Marla was busy writing up rose bushes and measuring lawn lengths, Daniel had quietly started acquiring homes in the neighborhood. Each time a house went up for sale, he used a different LLC to purchase it. Some were rentals, some were flipped and resold, but the key ones he held on to, carefully, quietly. That morning, his lawyer had sent a text. "Congrats, you now own 62% of the residential lots in Hidden Pines." Daniel read that text again over and over, like a secret too powerful to say out loud. It wasn't just about revenge. This was about justice. About standing up not only for his family, but for every quiet neighbor who had ever rolled their eyes at a pink violation notice and said nothing because it just wasn't worth the fight. He picked up the phone and dialed. "Steve," he said when his lawyer answered. "It's time." The emergency HOA meeting that evening was called under the usual guise: urgent neighborhood maintenance policies. But everyone in Hidden Pines knew exactly what it was about. Daniel didn't dress up. No tie, no button-up. Just jeans, a plain tee, and his steel-toe boots, still dusty from that morning's worksite. He wasn't there to impress anyone. He was there to end something that had gone on far too long. The community center was already packed when he arrived. Rows of folding chairs filled with familiar faces. Mr. Jensen, the retired Army vet, whose American flag had once been declared too large for aesthetic consistency. The Alvarez twins, fined for hosting a Quincy era with excessive noise. Even quiet Ms. Whitaker from the corner lot, whose unauthorized sunflowers had sparked a 6-week citation war. And then there was Marla. She stood at the front in her pastel cardigan, hands clasped tightly in front of her clipboard, her favorite weapon. The room hushed as she tapped her pen against the mic. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," she began, her smile as tight as the bun on her head. "I won't take up too much of your time. We're here to vote on an updated regulation limiting residential driveways to a maximum of 2 vehicles, all of which must be parked in enclosed garages." A collective groan rippled through the crowd. Daniel could see people shifting in their seats, whispering to one another. Marla raised her hand, silencing the room. "This rule is for the good of the community. We've had increasing reports of property value threats due to clutter." She didn't say his name. She didn't have to. Every eye in the room flicked toward Daniel for a second before turning back. Monica had wanted to come, but their son had a late tutoring session. Still, Daniel knew she was watching the live stream online. Steve had ensured the meeting was being recorded, legally, and distributed to the wider HOA member list. Daniel stood. "Point of order," he said calmly, projecting his voice. Marla blinked, clearly thrown off. "This isn't a Q&A session, Mr. Reyes." "It's not a question," he said, taking a step forward. "According to HOA bylaw section 5(2), any property owner with a controlling interest has the right to request a halt to all proposed votes until a verification of ownership is complete." The silence in the room was deafening. Marla stammered. What are you talking about?" Daniel reached into his worn leather folder and pulled out a printed map of Hidden Pines, color-coded, lot by lot. "I'm talking about this. As of 10 a.m. this morning, Civicor Holdings, my company, owns 62% of the residential lots in Hidden Pines. That makes me the majority stakeholder in this community." Murmurs turned into stunned gasps. Marla's hand gripped the podium, her knuckles turning white. "You've been buying the homes?" she said, voice shaking. "Under shell companies?" Daniel didn't blink. "Under legal entities, yes. All of them compliant. All of them lawful. All of them owned by people who were tired of being fined for living their lives." Mrs. Whitaker stood up in the third row. "You mean he's been protecting us this whole time?" Daniel turned slightly, nodded to her, then faced forward. "This isn't just about me," he said, voice louder now. "It's about the rules we've allowed to suffocate this neighborhood. The fines, the surveillance, the 3 a.m. measuring tapes. You've turned a peaceful community into your personal fiefdom, Marla." Her face was crimson. "This is outrageous. This is accountability." Daniel stepped aside and let Steve approach with a packet of documents. "We're filing an injunction to halt all enforcement of any new HOA regulations until we conduct a full financial and procedural audit," Steve announced, handing the papers to the stunned board secretary. Several board members glanced at each other, unsure, unprepared. Daniel turned back to the crowd. "You all deserve better. Not just fewer fines, but a community that listens, supports, and serves you. And starting tonight, you're going to get it." For a long beat, no one said anything. Then Mr. Jensen stood and clapped once. Then again. Others followed. A slow, growing round of applause that filled the room, not out of celebration, but relief. The kind of clapping people do when they realize someone finally said what they'd all been thinking for years. Marla grabbed her clipboard and stormed out without another word. Daniel sat down, heart pounding. Not because he was nervous, but because he knew this was just the beginning. The rules had changed, and he was going to make damn sure they changed for good. The next morning, Daniel stood in his driveway, sipping coffee from a mug that read, "Proud to be problematic." The sun hadn't been up for long, but the neighborhood was already buzzing. Literally. A drone hovered just overhead, its tiny rotors whining like an annoyed bee. Daniel raised an eyebrow and gave it a sarcastic wave. Down the street, he spotted Ronnie, Marla's husband, holding a remote control and glaring at him like Daniel had personally spray-painted his front lawn. It was only 8:12 a.m. So that's how it was going to be. By noon, word had spread like wildfire. Some of it good neighbors dropping by with quiet thanks, nervous hope in their voices. Others, not so much. Someone had dumped a bag of dog poop in his mailbox, twice. His trash can had been mysteriously knocked over every single day since the meeting. And then came the emails. An anonymous group, calling themselves Preserve Hidden Pines Alliance, began sending out bulletins to all residents. Polished, well-written pieces filled with fear-mongering about Daniel's hostile takeover. The language was dramatic. He's buying votes. He wants to dismantle order. Next, he'll replace our community park with low-income apartments. Daniel printed the email, stuck it to his fridge, and scribbled across it in Sharpie. Fear is loud. Truth is steady. But it wasn't just petty drama. It was strategic, calculated. The HOA board, what was left of it, refused to acknowledge the freeze Daniel had initiated. They continued to send fines to homeowners, pretending nothing had changed. And Daniel quickly realized, exposing Marla at that meeting had been step one, but undoing the damage she'd caused would take more than a mic drop moment. It would take rebuilding trust. So he started knocking on doors. Every evening, after work, Daniel would visit 5 houses, 10 if he had time. He listened. Really listened. He heard about Barbara's son, fined for playing basketball in the driveway. About the Nguyen family, forced to remove their garden lanterns because they didn't match the earth tone requirement. He took notes, asked for photos, gathered stories. And he wasn't alone. Ms. Whitaker offered to organize a community dinner. No rules, no dress codes, just good food and real neighbors. The Alvarez twins volunteered to create a bilingual community newsletter. Even Mr. Jensen offered to monitor the neighborhood's shared spaces, not as an enforcer, but as someone who actually gave a damn. A week passed, then another, and the tide began to shift. But the real blow came in a plain white envelope. Daniel opened it standing at his mailbox, heart sinking as he read the letter inside. Notice of HOA special vote. Petition for community confidence review. Due to recent upheaval and unauthorized representation, a special meeting will be held to vote on the dissolution of all newly proposed HOA oversight and to censure Mr. Daniel Reyes for overreach and misconduct. Date: Saturday, 7 p.m. Location: Community Center. At the bottom, in perfect cursive, Marla J. Weaver Chair. Preserve Hidden Pines Alliance. So that was her move. It wasn't just retaliation. It was an ambush disguised as order. A final attempt to discredit him and stop what he'd started. She couldn't fight him with truth, so she'd try to drown him in bureaucracy and fear. Daniel stared at the paper, then looked around the street. It was quiet, peaceful. Too peaceful. He knew what came next would decide everything. Not just for him, but for every neighbor who'd ever been afraid to plant a flower, park a car, or hang a flag. It was time to go all in. Saturday came quicker than Daniel expected. By 6:30 p.m., the parking lot outside the Hidden Pines Community Center was already full. The air was thick, not just with summer humidity, but tension. You could feel it in the way people walked past each other without saying hello. In the way Marla stood at the front steps, greeting each arriving guest like a politician, shaking hands before an election. Inside, The room was set up like a courtroom. Rows of chairs faced a long table, where the remaining board members sat, all with printed name tags and identical bottled water. At the center of it all was Marla. She wore a pale blue pantsuit that probably cost more than Daniel's entire wardrobe. Her posture was impeccable, her smile tight, and her eyes sharp like a hawk, waiting for a mouse to make the wrong move. Daniel walked in alone. No flashy entourage, no legal team, just a leather folder under one arm and a quiet resolve. As he sat near the middle row, he noticed familiar faces. Mrs. Whitaker, the Alvarez twins, Mr. Jensen, even Barbara with her teenage son, who gave him a shy thumbs up. The energy was divided, but not hostile. Not yet. Marla stood and tapped the mic. "Thank you, everyone, for coming on such short notice. Tonight's meeting is a special one. We're here to discuss recent disruptions to our community order and vote on whether these changes represent the will of Hidden Pines or the ambitions of one man." She didn't need to say his name. Every eye turned to Daniel. "Before we proceed," she continued, "I'd like to present Exhibit A." A projector came to life behind her, displaying a series of distorted images. His driveway zoomed in to make his vehicles look exaggerated. A screenshot of his company's website. A Google Maps satellite view with properties he owned, circled in red, as if he were the villain in some dystopian documentary. Marla's voice dripped with faux concern. "Mr. Reyes has, by his own admission, acquired 62% of this community through shell companies, quietly, secretly. He claims it's for our benefit, but is that truly the case?" Gasps, murmurs, a few muttered wows. Daniel stood up. "I'd like to respond." Marla hesitated. "You'll have your turn." "No," he said, voice firm. "The bylaws allow any homeowner to respond to accusations immediately. Section 8.4. I'm sure you know that one well." That earned him a chuckle from the back. Marla sat down, her lips thin. Daniel took the mic. For a moment, he didn't speak. He just looked around. "I didn't buy properties in this neighborhood to control anyone. I did it because my father lost his house to an HOA that cared more about uniform bushes than human beings. I made a promise I'd never let that happen to my family or anyone else again." He paused. "For 5 years, I watched. I watched as this board fined veterans for flagpoles, mothers for chalk art, grandmothers for sitting on porch swings past curfew. I documented everything. I gathered testimonies, because the only way to change a broken system is from within." He turned to the board. "I have here 32 signed complaints from homeowners. I have bank records showing $22,000 missing from last year's maintenance budget. I have emails where current board members discussed using fines as behavior correction." A wave of whispers rippled through the room. "And if you want to vote tonight, if you want to make this about me, then fine. Vote. But do it with all the information, because this isn't about a man with too many cars. It's about a board that forgot it serves the people, not the other way around." He stepped back, handed the mic to Marla. She didn't take it. Her hands were trembling. From the audience, a voice called out, "I move to censure the current board and hold an emergency election for a new one." It was Mrs. Whitaker. "I second," said Mr. Jensen. Chaos followed. Marla's composure cracked. She tried to regain control, banging the gavel, demanding order, but it was too late. The people had seen enough. And Daniel? He stood quietly, watching the board that once ruled with fear unravel before his eyes. But he knew this wasn't victory yet. The hardest part was still to come. The following morning, Daniel was back in his home office, poring over the voting data from the night before. An unofficial vote had been taken. 71% of the residents had supported the motion to dissolve the board and schedule new elections. It was a powerful message, but not binding. Not yet. He knew Marla wouldn't go down without a fight. She'd twist every rule, every loophole. And she still had allies on the inside. As if on cue, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Tyler Blake, the treasurer of the HOA, and Daniel's supposed ally. "We need to talk. Urgent. Meet me at the playground at noon." Daniel grabbed his keys. Tyler had been the one who tipped him off about the phantom renovation fees last year. Without his quiet support, Daniel wouldn't have gathered half the evidence he had. If Tyler was worried, it meant something serious. The playground was empty when Daniel arrived. Swings gently rocked in the breeze. Tyler sat alone on a bench, nervously rubbing his hands. Daniel approached. "What's going on?" Tyler looked up, eyes bloodshot. "It's bad, Dan. Marla's moving fast. She called an emergency executive board session this morning without notifying homeowners. They voted to suspend your voting rights due to a conflict of interest with property ownership." Daniel's jaw clenched. "That's illegal. They can't do that without due process." "I know, but they filed the motion with the county clerk already. It's public record now. And they've also frozen the HOA's general fund pending investigation." Daniel froze. "Wait, what?" "They're spinning it like you embezzled money. They've submitted doctored records. Marla's got a lawyer, some shark from Austin, and she's pushing a narrative that you're a slumlord trying to take over a wholesome community." Daniel sat down hard on the bench. "You're telling me I'm the one under investigation now?" Tyler nodded, guilt written all over his face. "And I'm sorry, Dan. I voted with them. I was scared. Marla threatened to leak some things about my taxes. She found some discrepancies in my filings from 2 years ago. I panicked." For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. He wasn't angry. Not yet. He was tired. He stared at the sandbox, the fading chalk drawings on the pavement, the little plastic slide where his daughter used to play when she was 6. He remembered why this mattered. Not just because of the HOA. Not just because of Marla. But because of what this place had meant to families like his. He turned to Tyler. "You still have access to the HOA financial records?" Tyler hesitated. "Technically, yes." "Then you're going to help me prove what they've done. You're going to download every receipt, every ledger, every suspicious expense from the last 5 years. And if you're serious about making this right, Tyler, you're going to testify." Tyler paled. "That could ruin me." Daniel's voice was quiet but firm. "It already is ruining you." Tyler nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll do it, but I need time. And protection." "You'll have both." Daniel stood. They were officially at war now. And this time, the battlefield wasn't a meeting room. It was a courtroom. It was 9:00 a.m. on a rainy Monday when Daniel walked into the county courthouse, a thick binder in one hand and calm steel in his eyes. For the past 10 days, he and Tyler had worked tirelessly at night, behind locked doors, over shared pots of bad coffee and worse fast food. The documents they uncovered painted a damning portrait. Fake contractor invoices, kickbacks for favored vendors, and over $200,000 in funds spent with no documentation. But it was one expense that stood out, the $5,300 landscaping invoice for Marla's private property, paid in full with HOA funds. Daniel had enough. He met with his lawyer, Gloria Shaw, a quiet, razor-sharp attorney who had once taken down a corrupt city zoning board in Houston. She wasn't flashy, but she never lost a case. "This won't just be a hearing," Gloria said, as she flipped through the binder. "We're filing for a temporary restraining order against the HOA board, specifically Marla. If granted, she'll be legally barred from acting on behalf of the association until a formal audit is complete." Daniel nodded. "Let's do it." 2 hours later, they stood in front of the judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who had a reputation for hating pettiness disguised as policy. Marla arrived late, flanked by 2 attorneys and trailing her ever-present cloud of perfume and entitlement. When she saw Daniel and Gloria, her smile faltered. But she quickly recovered and sauntered up to the bench, like it was a country club brunch. "Your Honor, this is an outrageous attempt by Mr. Dalton to disrupt a community for personal gain." The judge raised a hand, Save it, Ms. Bishop. I've read both filings, and frankly, I'm inclined to move this straight to hearing. But first, I have a question. She looked at Daniel. Mr. Dalton, do you have proof of your majority ownership in this HOA? Daniel opened his case folder and slid a notarized ownership report across the bench. Yes, Your Honor. As of last week, through various LLCs under my real estate trust, I own 56% of all residential lots within the governing boundary, all legally purchased over 5 years, all properly recorded. The judge's eyes didn't flinch. She turned to Marla. That means, Ms. Bishop, you've been enforcing fees and policies against the majority owner without his consent, and without a full board vote. Is that correct? Marla blinked. I wasn't aware. Oh, I think you were, the judge snapped. Especially since the same HOA account has been used to pay for expenses on your personal residence. Marla's lawyer tried to interject. Your Honor, if I may. You may not, the judge cut in. I'm issuing an immediate injunction. Miss Bishop, you are suspended from all HOA activity, effective immediately. This board will be audited. And Mr. Dalton, if your evidence checks out, you'll have the right to call for a reorganization vote. Daniel didn't smile. Not yet. Because this wasn't about power. It was about fairness. About giving his neighbors a chance to live without fear of being punished for minor violations. About undoing years of quiet oppression disguised as community standards. Marla rose, face red and hands trembling. This is a circus, she hissed. You're destroying everything we built. Daniel finally met her gaze. No, Marla. I'm rebuilding what you tried to control. She stormed out of the courtroom, reporters already swarming the hallway. Daniel stayed behind, shaking hands with Gloria, then opening his phone. He had a message from Mrs. Rodriguez. They're talking about you at the coffee shop. Good things. First time in years people are smiling again. And he closed his eyes. The war wasn't over yet, but the tide had turned.